we'll talk about the notion of changing ring. Okay, so this is called change of ring. And how to make modules over one ring into modules over another. So here's the standard thing one usually wants to do, which is called restriction of scalars. So this is the usual sort of thing. If you have a, for example, a vector space over the complex numbers is also a vector space over the real numbers, right? You can restrict the scalars to the reals, or in fact to vector space over the rational numbers and so on. So that's one way of thinking about restriction, but the general notion is slightly more gentle in fact. So suppose I have a ring R. Okay, so suppose I have R, a ring, not necessarily commutative, and suppose I have another ring S. So I'm going to change from R to S. Okay, and what do I have? I have a ring S together with a ring homomorphism from S to R. Okay, so suppose I'm given this setup. Phi is a ring homomorphism from the ring R to the ring S, from the ring S to the ring R. Okay, then I claim that if I have a module over R, then an R module M can be made into an S module. Okay, via, well, what's the, how do you do this? To do this, you must define a scalar multiplication, right? M is already an additive group. So let's do the following. I take an element S from S and I take an element M from my module, and I need to define scalar multiplication S multiplying M. The definition is the following. Well, what can I do? Since I'm given a ring homomorphism, I apply the ring homomorphism to S, thereby obtaining an element of the ring R, and now M is an R module. So I know how to scalar multiply M with the scalar phi of S, which comes from R, right? So this is the definition of the scalar multiplication by elements of S, and the thing is, it's easy to check the properties. Okay, so one just has to check that all the axioms of a module are satisfied. Let me just check one of them for you, and you can check the other one. So for example, if I multiply two elements, if I take two scalars S1 and S2 and I look at their product S1 S2, so S1 S2 acting on M must give me the same answer as S1 acting on S2 acting on M, right? So this is one of the axioms. So let's check that this is true. So we start with the left hand side, S1 S2 acting on M. By definition, you apply phi to S1 S2 and then act on M using the R module structure on M. But now phi is a homomorphism. This is the first place where we need to use it. This is phi S1, phi S2. It's a product of these two guys in R, and it's this product acting on M, right? But now the axiom, the corresponding axiom for R module says the product of two scalars of R acting on M is just what you get by acting one after the other. So it's phi S1 acting on phi S2 acting on M. But then that's exactly the right hand side. This by definition is S1 acting on S2 acting on M. Okay, and so on. So all the other axioms involve similar verifications. We will need to use all the properties of phi. Phi of S1 plus S2 is phi S1 plus phi S2, as well as phi of 1 equals 1. Identity goes to identity. Okay, so all of these will be involved. So it's easy to check all the axioms. So I leave that for you to check. So this process by which you can make an R module into an S module is called restriction of scalars, even though it's slightly more general than the notion of just truly restricting scalars. So the standard example, of course, is the canonical restriction setup. So suppose S is a subring of R, in which case I have the inclusion homomorphism. So this map phi is just the inclusion map. Then an R module automatically becomes an S module by truly honestly restricting scalars, right? By only acting by elements of S. But this general definition is nice, it's useful sometimes. So let me give you an instance of the general definition as well. So suppose S is the ring K of X, the ring of polynomials, and R is just the ring K, the field. So let's say K is a field in this case. So I take R to be K and S to be K of X, and I define a homomorphism from Kx to K. Well, what sort of homomorphism? I can take the what's called the evaluation map. Okay, given any polynomial, I evaluate it at some element of the field K. For example, I evaluate it at 1 or 0 or other points. Let's say I evaluate it at 1 in this example. So here is a map, and it's very easy to check that this evaluation map is a ring homomorphism. Now what does this mean? This means that if I have a K module, which means if I have a vector space, so then a K vector space, which is a module over K, a K vector space M, or becomes a module over Kx. Well, via what's the action? If we take a polynomial fx, act it on a element of M, by definition I must apply phi to fx, and that application of phi is like evaluating fx at 1. So I evaluate, I put x equals 1, I get an element of k, and I scalar multiply that element of k on M. Right? This was the definition. So this gives you, for example, this gives you a structure of a Kx module on M, and of course we have seen the more general ways of making K vector spaces into Kx modules. All you have to do is to specify one linear operator, okay? And in this case this is just this is just the choice of the linear operator identity here. Okay, so anyway, so this is just to illustrate that this general definition can give you something more interesting than just usual restriction. Now the opposite problem is usually called extension of scalars, which is you have a, well, I have a, let's say a map now from S to R as before, a homomorphism, but I have an S module. M is an S module now, and I want to see if I can somehow make it into an R module. Okay, so this is a slightly harder problem, I mean much harder problem. You can't do it in a very easy manner as before, because the same argument as before doesn't work. If you take an element of R, there is no easy way of defining scalar multiplication, because I can't convert it into an element of S by applying a homomorphism. The homomorphism goes in the wrong direction. Okay, so there is this, but there is a way of doing this. It involves tensor products and so on. So we won't get into this right now, but I just want to talk about one special case. Okay, and that special case is rather common and important. So here's one special case of extension of scalars, which is, suppose I have S is a ring and I take R to be the ring S modulo I, a quotient of S, okay, where I is some two-sided ideal. I need to pick a two-sided ideal of S. So the question is, if I give you an S module, can I make it into an S mod I module? Okay, can I make it into a module for the quotient? Okay, so let M be an S module. So the question really is, when can M be made into an S by I module? And to answer this, we define the annihilator of M. So here's a definition. So recall, in other contexts one has talked about annihilators of elements. So this is an annihilator of a module. So what's an annihilator of a module? Well, this is all scalars, this is all elements of S which kill every element of the module, such that Sm is 0 for all M in M. Okay, it acts as 0 on the entire module, kills everything. Now here's a little exercise. This is a ideal annihilator of M, is a two-sided ideal. Of the ring S. Okay, it's an easy verification. You just need to check that whether you multiply things on the left or on the right, the element continues to be in the annihilator, and also that it's closed under addition. So it just follows from the definition. So the annihilator of a module is a certain two-sided ideal of my ring S. And so here's the answer to the question: when can you make M into an S by I module? So if I is a two-sided ideal, is a two-sided ideal of S such that I is contained inside this annihilator, then M becomes S mod I module via the following definition. How do you define? So take an element of S mod I. What's a typical element look like? It's a coset, right? Let's call it S bar, the coset of S. So maybe I'll just write it as a coset S plus I. So look at the coset of S plus I. How can I make this act on M? Well, there's only one obvious way to define it. I'll just say this is equal to Sm. Okay, for all S in S. So suppose I define it like this. Okay, so the first thing that one has to check in all these cases is that this is well defined, right? What if I choose a different representative of my coset? Will I get the same answer? Okay, so well definedness is the first property. And that's more or less the only thing to be checked. The others are obvious. So suppose the same coset has two different representatives. Suppose S1 plus I is equal to S2 plus I for some S1 S2 in S. Okay, what does this mean? This says that their difference S1 minus S2 is in I. Okay, there's another way of saying that S1 minus S2 is in I. Okay, now let's check that I will get the same answer whether I apply S1 or S2, whether I choose S1 or S2 as my representative. Okay, so observe S1 minus S2 is in I, but I is contained inside the annihilator of M. Okay, what does it mean? It means that S1 minus S2 annihilates every element of the module. M is 0 for all M in M. What does that mean? It says S1 acting on M is the same answer as S2 acting on M for all M in M. Okay, and that's exactly what we wanted to prove, right? So that completes the proof of well definedness, because if you had chosen S1 as your representative, you would have gotten S1M. If you had chosen S2, you would have gotten S2M. But those two are the same answer always. Okay, so this is well defined. And then the other axioms are more or less obvious. So I will leave the other axioms for you to check. Of a module, if I take a sum of two cosets, then the right hand side becomes a sum. Or if I take a product, it gives you successive actions and so on. Everything follows because it's finally only depends on the representative. Okay, so check that the other axioms also work. Okay, and so this is a very important and useful proposition. An example of its use is when you have kx modules. So suppose V is a k vector space which I make into a kx module. Recall, how do you make this into a kx module? You pick a linear operator, you fix some linear operator on V, and you make V into a kx module by saying that how do I make a polynomial fx act on a vector V? I just substitute the operator t in place of x. It gives me a new linear operator, and it's that operator acting on V. Okay, so this was the definition for all V. So I've made V into a kx module, and now the question is, well, what's the whole business of annihilators and so on. So let's just compute the annihilator of this module. So here is an interesting. So what is the annihilator of this module V? thought of as a kx module. So I'm doing everything over kx. So what does the annihilator of v over kx mean? It means it's all those elements, so all those polynomials in kx which annihilate the whole module. In other words, which means when I plug in the operator t, it just gives me 0 on every vector. So this is 0 for all vectors v in V. In other words, the operator ft is actually the 0 operator, right? So this property here can be rephrased to say that f of t is just the 0 operator. Okay. Now observe that, so we already said the annihilator is an ideal, okay, and kx is a principal ideal domain, which means that this must be a principal ideal, right? So this must be the ideal generated by a single polynomial. Let's call that polynomial mt of x, because it depends on my choice of t. And well, what are the properties, defining properties of this polynomial? Firstly, this polynomial annihilates annihilates t. When I plug in t, I just get the 0 operator. And because it's the generator of the ideal, it means that among all the polynomials which annihilate t, this is the one of the smallest degree, for example. Okay. And if you sort of recall your linear algebra, this is exactly what is termed the minimal polynomial of the linear operator t. Okay, it's exactly this. It's the smallest, well, it's the smallest degree monic polynomial. You can also normalize it to have leading coefficient 1. So the smallest degree monic polynomial which annihilates the operator t, that's exactly the minimal polynomial. So that's the annihilator of v thought of as a kx module. So in fact what this implies is that if I make v into a kx module using my operator t, then in fact it's more than just a kx module. V is actually a module over kx modulo any ideal which is contained in the annihilator. In particular, it's a module over kx modulo the ideal mtx. Okay, and mtx is the minimal polynomial of t. So in some sense, things like diagonalizability and many other properties of linear algebraic properties sort of come from the structure of this ring. So we'll probably do this in one of the examples. So you've probably seen things like if the minimal polynomial factors into distinct linear factors, then the operator is diagonalizable and so on. Okay, so we'll consider things like that in the problem sessions.